Hello readers and writers, I'm MJ and let's talk about writing autistic characters. This is the second part in a series on writing autistic characters. I hope to expand on it, and so if you have any suggestions or specific questions, please let me know in the comments below. Part 1 was addressed to actually autistic authors, but the second part is addressed to neurotypical or specifically non-autistic authors. So let's get started. It is important to know why you want to write autistic characters. This is something you should ask yourself about every main character that you want to write, but it is especially important to ask yourself about characters that you are writing outside your own experience and with marginalized identities. Autism is a marginalized identity. And I'm not saying not to write autistic characters. I am saying it is important to be honest about your own reasons for starting the project and asking yourself if you are the person to be writing the story, or if it should be better left to actually autistic authors. We are here. We are writing, and so often our voice is passed over for neurotypical writers, writing about our experiences. So, if your why is to have autistic representation in fiction, maybe amplify autistic authors instead. Or at least carefully write your autistic characters and also amplify autistic authors. I am semi-unique in that I am autistic and the parent of 2 autistic kids and have a master's in developmental psychology where I studied autism and have worked clinically with autistic kids for a short time. I can honestly tell you that each of these viewpoints are very different. Even as an autistic adult, I do not speak for my children's experience. I will often ask them their viewpoint about what I write, and if I do need to be their voice, because I have a kid who is not always verbal, I get confirmation that I'm speaking for them correctly. It is great that you know somebody with autism, but you still have an outside perspective. Building off that, autistic people are diverse. We are found in every demographic. Although the young white male is the more stereotypical viewpoint, that is the stereotype used to represent a vast spectrum of people. Be careful not to stereotype autistic people. Every autistic person has plenty of experiences of people coming to them, telling them about young white boys who they may vaguely know, such as their cousin's neighbor's nephew. When I was writing In Between, I featured a female single mother who is autistic, and I still had comment from my editor about how she's behaving differently than her nephew, the editor's nephew, who is autistic. Of course she is. She's a grown woman with a child of her own. You wouldn't expect any other demographic to be the same as adults as you would them to be as children. And autistic children grow up to be autistic adults. We don't grow out of autism, and even if it isn't as a parent, it is because we learn as we get older. We do not become neurotypical, but we do grow up. And that will look different for every autistic person. A horrible example of autistic representation is the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. The author did zero research and publicly admitted that the character was very stereotypical. He was made to feel bad for just being who he is. A very ableist take. You can also find this in Red Moon by Kim Stanley Robinson, where the autistic character breaks down lamenting how he wishes he wasn't autistic. Being autistic is not all sunshine and roses, but it is one thing for an autistic writer to write about lived experiences and another for a neurotypical writer to expect us to hate who we are. How do you write about someone else's trauma? It is very easy to dismiss it, or to put it all on the autistic character to fix their trauma. or to play to autistic stereotypes. But there can be very real trauma for autistic people just from having to navigate a world that's built for neurotypical people. Also, autistic people are more likely to be taken advantage of and suffer from abuse. These are complex topics that should not be minimized, and they also shouldn't be exploited. Autistic people are more likely to have sensory issues, to be genderqueer, to not blindly follow social norms, to have increased anxiety, to have CPTSD, to be aphasia, to be left-handed, etc. This partly goes back to autism being complex, as well as no two autistic people being the same. Also, being autistic means that we don't think the same way that neurotypical people do, and this should be reflected in your writing. Your autistic character should be complex and multifaceted and not just be a caricature of an autistic stereotype. And how do you know if what you wrote is stereotypical? How do you know if it's offensive or liberating? You must absolutely have autistic sensitivity readers. And you should probably seek out autistic beta readers also. If you only feature an autistic character for a small portion of the book or a section of the book, then that's the part that needs to go to autistic sensitivity readers. But if your main character is autistic and autism is featured entirely throughout the book, then the entire book needs to be read by sensitivity readers. Also, I strongly recommend more than one sensitivity reader. We are a diverse group, and getting separate opinions will help you out in the long run. I used sensitivity readers when I wrote Neurodiverse. Yes, I am autistic, but I also represented a lot of unique voices in that novel, and I wanted to make sure that I was doing so appropriately. Not only did I run it by my autistic kids for other viewpoints, but I also sought out other autistic voices, and I paid them. I firmly believe sensitivity readers should be paid. Otherwise, they're being exploited for their identity. Just because you don't say autism doesn't mean we don't know you're talking about us. It doesn't give you a free pass. An example of this is the book The Maid. The outward appearance of Molly, the main character, presents as very autistic. However, the book is told from Molly's first-person perspective, and the internal perspective is all wrong. There are autistic readers who like this book because we have so very little representation, but when I point out that this internal voice is just a flat effect that is a stereotype of how we represent to neurotypical people and not at all like the complex internal monologue that we have in our own brain that are often very emotional and hyper empathetic. I haven't had an autistic reader disagree with me on this statement. I mean, it could still happen. I don't speak for all autistic people. We are a broad group with different viewpoints. But who we are in our head is not who we appear to others. And just ignoring the word autism and not putting it down on page doesn't excuse bad representation. Also, don't use the word Asperger's or Aspie. Some autistic people still choose to use these terms, and that's their right. But as a neurotypical writer or a non-autistic writer, these words are not to be used. Hans Asperger was an affiliate in World War II, and he picked autistic people to live and those who were going to die. And he didn't do this because he was some benevolent being that history has tried to make him out to be. And if you want to know some more information on this, then you can go read the nonfiction book Asperger's Children. This was written by a non-autistic author, and I'm not a fan of the conclusions in the last chapter, but the history is well-researched and impassively presented. I know this is a lot. I am very passionate about autism and writing, and when the two collide, you can see me in full force. I have a lot of opinions, and I firmly acknowledge that. I do not want to discourage you, but I also do not want to read any more autistic representation in books that are degrading. I will leave on this one last note. Read Autistic Rep by autistic authors. My books, In Between, The Immortal Part of Myself, and Neurodiverse are all three very different examples, but there are many others. I have videos on my channel that you can go and check out. Just this beginning of this week, I mentioned several books that are on my TBR that have autistic own voice representation. Also, if there is anything you have questions about or you want me to expand on, please just let me know down in the comments. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and until next time.